Abraham Lincoln's letter to Ulysses S. Grant, at the time a major general in the Union Army, dated July 13, 1863, is important for a number of reasons. For one thing, it's Lincoln's first direct correspondence with Grant, the beginning of a relationship that would, in a year, develop into Lincoln naming Grant commander of all the armies of the Union, and it's one of the times we see Lincoln sincerely congratulating one of his commanders in a letter. And the fact that the president himself wrote a letter of commendation shows just how much this victory meant to Lincoln. So much that he actually admits a mistake in his own strategies, as we'll see later on. The letter was written as a congratulations for Grant's victory in taking Vicksburg, Mississippi, after a siege that had lasted from May 18th until July 4th. The victory opened the Mississippi River for the Union's use and divided the Confederate States down the Mississippi River. Now, Lincoln begins his letter saying, "My dear General, I do not remember that you and I ever met personally. I write this now as a grateful acknowledgment for the almost inestimable service you have done to the country." Lincoln does not use the letter to Major General Grant. He doesn't address the letter, to Major General Grant, but instead to "My dear General." Now, Lincoln would sometimes use the "My dear" title as a means of humoring his generals a little bit, acknowledging that he cares about them, but then would quickly voice some concern he had with their command or their decisions on certain matters. But here he's using it in all sincerity. He really does admire Grant for his victory. And Lincoln points out that he doesn't believe that him and Grant had ever met, and this is true. In fact, they would not meet until Grant came to Washington, D.C. to accept the post of Lieutenant General in March of 1864. Now, at this time in the war, the Union was still on shaky ground. They hadn't had a significant victory, and the war had been raging for almost 2 years. But now Grant delivered this major victory, which not only divided the Confederacy, but it was riding right behind the victory at Gettysburg, and it gave a huge upswing of morale to the troops and the people as at home, that the Army could not only deliver this war, but that there are now signs that it'll be over soon. Now Lincoln continues this letter, saying, "I wish to say a word further. When you first reached the vicinity of Vicksburg, I thought you should do what you finally did. March the troops across the neck, run the batteries with the transport, and thus go below. And I never had any faith except a general hope that you knew then better than I that the Yazoo Pass expedition and the like could succeed." What Lincoln is referring to by march around the neck, run the batteries with transport is marching the army down the western bank of the Mississippi River and having the Navy ferry them across the river through its backwaters and land to the south of Vicksburg, as opposed to a direct assault from the northwest or a naval attack down the Mississippi River, which had been tried before but failed. Lincoln is congratulating Grant and himself, for he notes that Grant did what Lincoln believed was the correct move, and since it worked, it affirmed Lincoln's beliefs as well as reinforced his own military tact. However, as we continue down, we see that Lincoln wasn't completely correct in his plans, as he notes, "When you got below and took Port Gibson, Grand Gulf, and vicinity, I thought you should go down the river and join General Banks, and when you turned northward, east of the Big Black, I feared it was a mistake. Now I wish to make the personal acknowledgment that you were right and I was wrong. Yours very truly, A. Lincoln." Now this is a big deal. Lincoln is admitting an error in judgment. And this is very rare in his letters, in anything written. But so right here, it shows truly how much this means to Lincoln, that he's openly admitting, well, this was a private letter, but he's admitting to Grant that he was wrong in his designs. And like so many people, he thought that after Grant had taken Port Gibson and Grand Gulf, securing the vicinity in the south, he should follow the Mississippi northward and merge with General Banks' forces for an assault on Vicksburg. But Grant didn't do this. Instead, Grant chose to march his army northwest and sack the Confederate outpost of Jackson, Mississippi, to cut communications at Vicksburg, as well as take away any possible threat of immediate Confederate reinforcements. Although this strategy was costly in both time and men, it succeeded, and Lincoln acknowledges this was the best path and that Grant made the right decision. Now, again, this letter shows Lincoln acknowledged good work when it was done, but looking a little deeper, there's another dimension to this. As during the Vicksburg campaign, Grant received a good deal of criticism for his maneuvers and prolonged duration of the campaign, which raised some doubts about whether he could capture the Mississippi. So much so that Senator Benjamin Wade reportedly told Lincoln that the American people insisted that he replace Grant, to which Lincoln is reported to have said, "To show what extent this sentiment prevails, even Congressman Washburn, who has always claimed Grant as his by right of discovery, has deserted him, and demands his removal, and I really believe I am the only friend Grant has left. Grant advises me that he will take Vicksburg by the 4th of July, and I believe he will do it, and he shall have the chance." When observed in this light, Grant's success was the confirmation of Lincoln's belief and the fulfillment of a leap of faith he took when others advised him to do differently. And there's also a possible political dimension for Lincoln's acknowledgement. As before the campaign began, General John A. McClernand, who had entered the war as a Democratic congressman of Illinois representing Lincoln's old district, arrived in Washington seeking command of such a campaign to open the Mississippi River. And it's noted that when he got there and when he asked Lincoln for this commission, he used the promise of new regiments of loyal Democrats as well as the threat of exciting disloyalty in the Northwest. Lincoln conceded this command to McClernand, but the regiments were sent by Secretary of War Edwin Stanton for Grant's use at Memphis, and when he came to the scene, he superseded McClernand, so Grant was now the commanding officer. Thus, with the victory at Grant's hands and not McClernand's, Lincoln didn't have to worry about potential insubordination or any of that from McClernand in the Northwest. But whatever the motivation for keeping Grant in charge, it paid off, and this letter is proof of Lincoln's satisfaction. Now, upon receiving it, Grant was supposedly so enamored that it left him incapable of replying, as he said modesty halted his pen. This must have bothered Lincoln some, because 3 weeks later he wrote Grant another letter asking if Grant had received his previous one from the 13th, to which Grant finally replied that he had. Regardless, this letter presents Lincoln's early affirmation towards Grant, and more importantly, his appreciation for those who could put their minds toward a situation and come out victorious. It is Lincoln turning his eye toward a man who he believed could bring him victory and did, and whom he would look to for the future victories to bring about the end of this war.